Okay, humans, I'm going to talk about the eight trigrams, and it's not only about the eight trigrams, but it's also about the way Chinese logic that's important for Chinese medicine. So while the details here will be with the trigrams, but it's also a way of thinking that we need to learn if we're going to really understand Chinese medicine the way ancient people understood it. I also will, I'll talk about the general trigram associations and also their medical associations. So you probably know that a trigram is a set of three lines that has, a choice of a yin line or a yang line. A yang line is one long line. A yin line has a break in the middle. So they're called solid or broken lines. And if you take a stack of three and you stack them up, with every possible combination of yin and yang lines, there are mathematically eight possibilities. And that's what we're going to talk about. Um, so, yeah, these are the eight in their pre-heaven order. There's also a post-heaven order, but we won't talk about that today. And if you change this into zeros and ones, it would actually be counting in binary, in the binary system. It's like how computers work with zeros and ones or ons and offs. So anyway, if you're going to use change theory, this is stuff you need to just know. You need to be able to recognize a trigram. If somebody says Miigua, you need to know, oh, that's fire, and it's a yang line on the bottom, a yin line in the middle, and a yang line on top, and so forth. So we're going to talk about these eight and their correspondences. First, let's talk about Chen Guà, which is three yang lines. And so the next slide will have medical correspondences, but this slide has general correspondences that come from two places. One is there's a book called Méihuā Yìshù, or Plum Flower Change Divination, that's attributed to Xiao Kangji, but really wasn't written by him. So it has a lot of correspondences listed there. And then also there's a much, much, much older work called Shuō Guà, which is one of the so-called 10 wings of the I Ching that's attributed to Confucius. So these correspondences come from those two places, those two sources. And so Chen is associated with metal element. Therefore, it represents things made of metal, including precious things, because metal can be precious. Because it can represent precious things like gold, it can mean valuable things in general, including pearls and jade. Mirrors in ancient times were made of highly polished brass, and so they have metal as corresponding to them. Metal is hard, so things that are hard, including in your body, the bones are hard. So bones, of course, in five element theory are associated with kidneys and water, but eight trigram theory doesn't always agree with five element theory. And in terms of medicine, actually, sometimes we might use one theory and sometimes we might use the other. It's not a matter of which is right or wrong, but sometimes things can be seen more than one way, correctly seen more than one way. Chen represents heaven because it's pure yang, and that's the most yang thing, is what's up above us and insubstantial. And so it then represents things that are high up, like fruit from trees, as opposed to strawberries or something that grows on the ground. The head and hats. Also, heaven is said to be round and earth is said to be square. And so round things are associated with heaven. When you watch the night sky, it looks like it has circular movement. Excuse me. Qian also represents the father because all the three yin lines are the mother, Kun, and the three yang lines are the father, and then all the other trigrams have two yang and one yin, or two yin and one yang, and those are the children. Since it's the father, it represents old men in general. It represents people who have power, who are ruling, whether it's because they're government officials or they're nobles or princes, but, a man who has power. And also, in all of this macho stuff, striving and strength. In the post-heaven order of the 8 trigrams, Chen is in the northwest and represents coldness and ice, because the northwest of China does have coldness and ice. And heaven, if you climb up in a high mountain, it gets colder and colder as you go up. So it kind of seems a little odd that it's pure yang, yet it's coldness, but this is the 8 trigrams. Then there's always a bunch of miscellaneous things that's really hard to attribute in one particular way or the other. They were concerned with animals because, often they were agricultural and they, needed to deal with animals. So some of these are kind of exotic, and maybe that's the point, that Chen has a association with something that's rare and precious, like gold. And so elephants and swans and lions, I don't know, they have some status or something like that. We'll see a number of the trigrams have association with horses of different types. And they didn't have cars back then. The horse would be equivalent of a car. So one of the ways we could use this is try and figure out what's an equivalent, car for these kinds of horses. And I don't have an answer for that, but yeah. And deep red. No, I don't have an answer. I don't have answers for everything, but you can see how the thinking is to find like the main meanings of Chen, like metal, heaven, father, and northwest, and then it breaks down into things that relate to that particular characteristic. So let's talk about it in terms of medical correspondences. We already know it represents heaven. It's considered hard metal because there's another metal trigram, Shuō Guà, which has a yin line, so it's softer. Shuō Guà is the youngest daughter, so it's softer. So Shuō is soft metal and Chen is hard metal, like weapons, whereas soft metal might be beautiful jewelry or something like that. We saw it's the father. Okay. So as far as medicine goes, the head, the brain, the face, and even the forehead within the face, because those are upper parts. Also, the head is, the word head is used in Chinese like it is in English to mean somebody who's in charge, the headman of a village or something like that. And so it also has this aspect of being in charge, which, Chen is the father, so he was thought to be in charge of the family. The brain is kind of in charge of a lot of things. Within the body itself, the chest is still in the upper body, which relates to heaven. The lungs are in the chest, and the lungs are metal. And the lungs deal with air, which is the qi from heaven. Air is the qi from heaven. The lungs deal with weather, and in Chinese, tian qi, heaven qi, is the term for weather. So the lungs deal with weather through the skin, the pores, the body hair. They deal with like air through the skin, the pores, the body hair, and through breathing. And so they have a strong metal correspondence. Metal inherently is reflective. So like these mirrors, I mentioned a mirror before is made out of metal. You could polish metal so much that you could see your reflection in it. And so, heaven is also metal because it's reflective. It reflects the light of the sun, the moon, and the stars. And as I said, heaven is considered round and earth is considered square. So roundness goes with this. I don't know if that has to do with medicine, but there wasn't room on the previous slide. In addition, then we saw bones because Chen represents hard things. And upper jiao, again, the upper part of the trunk. And maybe large intestine, because large intestine is yang metal. But large intestine is not in the heaven part of the body, it's like down below. So in theory, large intestine could go there in practice. It's not much associated with Shuō Guà. Besides this external injury and injury by metal, like getting cut or stabbed or you know, a sword injury or a knife injury or something like that, and bleeding, and this trigram is associated with bleeding due to injury, and maybe that's why it had deep red on the previous slide. So those are kind of the medical correspondences. Let's talk about the lungs a little bit more. Lingshu, chapter 78, says heaven is yang. Within the 5 zhang, the 5 yin organs, it corresponds to the lungs. The lungs. So here it's telling us heaven corresponds to the lungs. So Chen corresponds to the lungs. The lungs are the lid, or the lungs are the canopy of all the other organs. Look in this picture, the lungs are above the heart, they're above the liver and the spleen and so forth, you know, all the other organs. And so they're like a canopy over all the other organs. In addition, what's the job of a canopy or an umbrella or a parasol? Is to protect you from weather. And that's what the lungs do. They protect the other organs from weather through the skin, pores, body hair, and even through what gets filtered through when you inhale. Shuō chapter 5 says the qi of heaven flows freely through the lungs. And so lungs have this, you know, they're the canopy above us, just like heaven is the canopy above, you know, heaven is the canopy above us, and the lungs are the canopy above all the other organs. So you might say, wait, the lungs are, first off, they're a yin organ. And secondly, on the Tai Chi, they're on the yin side of the Tai Chi. Metal is in the west and so forth. But always with yin yang theory, you have to ask, what are you comparing? And when we compare the physical position of the lungs are above and the lungs are on the outside with the skin, the pores, and body hair. So in this regard, the lungs are yang. In other regards, the lungs are not yang. So that's Chen, heaven, and the lungs. I might go a little quicker from here on. I just wanted to orient you to this. Shuō Guà is 3 yin lines. It's associated with earth in terms of land, in terms of planet Earth, in terms of territory. It's also associated with earth element. So soil or earth element, things made out of earth like pottery, square things. We saw in the previous couple slides that heaven is round and earth is square. Earth is associated with the color yellow in 5 element theory, but also a lot of earth is dark, so it has black to it. Oxen, cattle, calves. So it's the mother, so a calf makes sense as the baby animal, but you know, oxen plow the earth and they eat what grows from the earth, and they're just, you know, slow and agricultural, so they're associated with earth. Also, crops like millet, rice, and other grains are associated overall with earth element, although sometimes when they talk about the 5 grains, they may be associated with specific elements, but in general, grain is associated with earth, planet earth, with territory, with land, and also with earth elements. And within the body, the abdomen, for 2 reasons. One is, well, 3 maybe. One is it's below the chest and the head. And another is that Kun represents the mother. And one way we know a mother is when we see a pregnant person. And pregnancy happens within the abdomen. But earth element is also digestion, which takes place in the abdomen. So, okay, it's the mother, it's the older woman, it's not one of the daughters. And so it can represent old women in general, even old women who have power. Like if a woman is the boss of a company, then she would be represented by Kun. We saw abdomen because of mother. The mother, the stereotype is that she's nourishing, nurturing, and of service, and she's compliant, following the lead of her husband. Of course, good luck with that today. She takes care of, the stuff at home, so she tries to be frugal and not waste money, and she's even natured. So these stereotypes may not work today, but these are the correspondences for Kun. And when you think of a cow, some of these, evenness, well, not if you make the cow really mad at you, but anyway, earth, not earth element, but earth as the opposite of heaven, spreads out. The earth is vast. You could travel very far. So things that spread out like that, like cloth, and other fabric, because also that's woman's work. And clothing is made out of fabric. Soft things, because cloth is soft. The mother is softer than the father. And crowds. At the moment, I don't know why crowds, but anyway, the earth, everything around us is contained by the earth. So things that contain like cauldrons or chariots or carriages or cars, in the sense of that they're taking things or people, maybe. Storage, and again, crowds. Miscellaneous, birds, books, writing, literary works. That's kind of surprising, books, writing, and literary works. So, maybe women should have been literate back in ancient times. Handles, the southwest is its post-heaven direction, and stripes. Okay, whatever. So medical correspondences, we saw it's earth element, and earth the opposite of heaven, and the mother. So the belly or the abdomen, because that's where pregnancy occurs, but also the middle jiao and digestion, the spleen and stomach, because earth element is about nourishment and digestion. So spleen, stomach, the flesh corresponds to the spleen and stomach. Skin, in the sense, like, I know we want to think of lungs for skin according to 5-element theory, and in many ways the lungs do govern the skin because they deal with air. The skin deals with air, but just in the sense of, look at this wide meadow. This is not a mountain, but this is like, the surface of the earth. You could think of it as the skin of the earth is Shuō Guà. And of course, female reproductive organs, because it's the mother. Moving on to Zhen Guà. Zhen Guà is wood element. It represents thunder. Thunder is the sound. Actually, technically speaking, lightning will go with Li Guà, fire. But this is thunder, so it represents sounds, and therefore things that make sounds, and especially if they're of wood elements, so bamboo or wooden musical instruments. Dragons are like thunder. Neighing horses have loud voices like thunder. Movement, coming forth, diffusion, swiftness, because thunder suddenly strikes. Yeah, and it's strong. This is, by the way, the oldest son. So, it's second to the father, but it's still, pretty high ranking. So strong. This is kind of another macho trigram. Not all of the trigrams that represent sons are so macho. This one is pretty macho, though. And so strong decisions. Remember, this is yang wood, and gallbladder is also yang wood, and gallbladder is in charge of decision making. So that may have an association with it. As wood, it represents things that are growing, plants and so forth, luxuriant, fresh things. Firewood is made of wood. Green and east are associated with wood element. And again, bamboo or wood musical instruments, because they're made of wood. Anything made of wood could be. Miscellaneous, horses, especially horses that like to neigh a lot because of the sound. And then because of dragons, it also represents snakes and then other creepy crawly things. Okay, its yang line is below. Yang is movement. So creepy crawly things are moving on the ground down below, maybe. It also represents the hoofs or the feet, which feet will relate to medicine. It's again the yang line below. And what part yang is movement. So what part of our body down below is moving a lot? Our feet. And it's the oldest son because it's a yang line on the bottom. The bottom line is the first line. And a high road, I don't. So then the medical correspondences, we have yang, yin, yin. I mentioned the feet. You can kind of almost see the two legs rising above the movement of the feet, represents thunder. It's hardwood because it's a yang or sun trigram, whereas Shuō Guà is soft wood because it represents the oldest daughter. Okay, we've seen the feet. So if somebody has a problem with their feet, we could think of Zhen Guà, the lower part of the legs. The throat and the voice. Well, of course, the voice, because sound is associated with Zhen Guà, thunder. But there's another reason for the throat and the voice. And so we'll see Dui Guà soon. That's got two yang lines on bottom and a yin line on top. And that represents the mouth, which is the opening up above. But now we've got this opening not only up above, but the opening goes deeper. And so it represents the throat, not just the mouth, but, the throat. And so, yeah, where am I? Throat, voice, okay. Internal wind. In Chinese medicine, when the liver gets really agitated, then internal wind builds up, and that's kind of like a tornado. That's, very young, agitated wood element that's whipping around. And so internal wind belongs to Zhen Guà. It strikes suddenly. Yeah. Sinews, because wind is like movement, tremors and convulsions and spasms. Wood is liver, is sinews. Head hair, that's a weird one. I don't know why, but that's on the lists. Maybe I could come up with an idea, but I don't have an idea at this moment. Fright, which is very much associated with wind in Chinese medicine. So something that startles you, like thunder startles you and you jump. And so fright is like thunder, sudden, like that. And of course, liver, gallbladder. Liver, in some regards, will go with Shuō Guà, and in some regards goes here. When liver is having internal wind, it goes here. In other cases, it may go with Shuō Guà. And gallbladder, because it's yang wood, like this is yang wood. So I came across a study which I think is pretty interesting. It doesn't talk about Zhen Guà in it, but this is from a journal called Cephalalgia. So head pain, headaches and stuff like that. Lightning and its association with the frequency of headache in people who get migraines. And so the aim of this article is to determine if lightning is associated with the frequency of headache in people with migraines. The deal is that, well, I told you Zhen is thunder, not lightning, but when there's lightning, there's usually thunder. And they thought to study lightning, not to study thunder, but it comes out pretty similar. And so there's this whole long thing, but basically they determined the odds of headaches on lightning days compared to non-lightning days in people who study, people who tend to get migraines. And so the results, like it tells you the demographics and, it talks about the variables, all that kind of stuff. You can pause the video if you actually want to read that. But this study suggests that lightning represents a trigger for a headache in people who get migraines that can't be completely explained by other factors in weather. And so why is that here? Thunder is Zhen Guà, is wood. Yang wood is gallbladder. Gallbladder's channel is called the Shaoyang channels, which go over the side of the head, which is the location where classic migraines happen. And Shaoyang conditions are often one-sided, and migraines are often one-sided. So you can see this correlative thinking gets us from thunder, lightning, over to Shaoyang headaches. It makes perfect sense in Chinese medicine. Okay, let's keep going. You can pause this at any time if you've had enough. Okay, Shuō Guà is yin wood. It's got a yin line on bottom, so it's the oldest daughter because the bottom line is first. And Shun is associated with wind and its wood element. And so things that happen in the air on the wind, fragrance, aroma, or even bad smelling things move through the air with the wind. Sails and fans work through wind. Birds, fly up in the air, although chickens and roosters, not so much, but birds in general. So feathers and fur are ruffled by the wind. The wind comes and goes, so ebb and flow. The wind disperses things. If you have a pile of dust and the wind comes, it'll blow the dust in every direction. Entering, wind penetrates. Even if you have lots of sweaters on, if it's windy out, the wind can just cut through your layers of clothing and penetrate and make you feel cold. Arranging, wind rearranges things. Bending, wind bends the trees and the grasses and the plants. So wood, of course, herbs, grasses, trees, branches, leaves, bamboo, wooden things again. And then wind is more delicate than thunder. Okay, and so now we have craftsmen and delicate work. Carving wooden things and stuff like that. Zhen Guà is more abrupt and sudden, and wind is, this wind is more gentle. This isn't really talking about tornadoes, which would go more with internal wind, and with Zhen Guà, this is talking about more gentle kinds of wind. So craftsmen, exquisite objects. Wood, of course, is the color green in 5-element theory, bearing no fruit. Maybe the wind knocks the fruit off the trees, I don't know. And high profit. Those last two things are a little odd, and maybe they go over with miscellaneous, but those two things come from Shuō Guà, this 2,500-year-old text, so we can't ignore them, even if we don't always understand them. Wind, Shuō Guà is considered to be associated with long, straight things. Maybe, if you have a streamer, a flag, a banner, when the wind blows, it goes long. Like some Chinese kites are really, really long. So it's associated with snakes, and because they're long, and rope. Vertical things like a plumb line, if you're a carpenter, you hang a weight on a string, and that string will be totally perpendicular to the ground, and then you can make a straight line, a plumb line. Tall things and high things. And the thighs, which the thigh bones are long, straight bones, but I'll talk more about thighs on the next slide. Miscellaneous things, immortals, Taoists. I don't know why. Monks and nuns, because they shave their head and they're bald, and baldness is associated with this. We saw Zhen Guà had hair and Shuō Guà has baldness. And I don't have a good answer for that, but this baldness is from that Shuō Guà, that ancient book. Broad foreheads, which when you're bald, maybe your forehead looks broad. The whites of the eyes in the color white. Again, I don't have answers for everything, but an answer exists somewhere. It's just, I don't know everything. The oldest daughter we saw, because the bottom line is yin. Southeast is its direction in the post-heaven order of things, and a mortar and pestle, where you grind things down. So medically, it represents its wind and wood, its soft wood element, yin wood. It's the oldest daughter. And the thighs, so look, the thighs are the place, excuse me, the thighs are the place where the legs split apart from the one piece of the trunk. And so basically this is the whole area where, you know, you would wear a mini skirt or where you would wear a pair of short shorts. It represents that whole area. And you can see the image in the lines of the trigram. Also upper arms, which are parallel to the thighs, but that's not as used quite as often. I think that's from Méihuā Yìshù, the plum flower divination, which comes from the Song dynasty and not from the 2,500-year-old stuff. So the thighs, the buttocks, the hips, this whole region here. External wind, so like wind invades and you have fever and chills and a common cold or a flu, but not internal wind, because even though those things aren't good, but Shuō Guà is more gentle than Zhen Guà. B patterns, which means wind and other evils, especially wind and cold, invade the joints and cause pain. Qi disease or wind disease, obviously wind disease because it's wind, but wind is really just chaotic movement of qi. So wind stroke, that could go with Zhen Guà depending on the details, but that's like stroke, okay? Intestinal diseases, yeah, oh well. Liver and maybe gallbladder, but it's yin wood, so it's going to be more on the liver side. So if the liver gets violent, like with internal wind, that can go with Zhen Guà, but gallbladder doesn't usually go with Shuō Guà. Okay. Kan Guà is a yin line, a yang line, a yin line. It represents water. It's a yang, it's a sun because it has one yang line. So for water, rain, snow, moistening, the flow of things, ditches, canals, tools that are used in water, pumps or whatever, things in water. Wine is a liquid. Salt, you know, well, salt water, the ocean and so forth. Water, this Kan Guà is associated with the flow of blood. We'll see this on the next slide. So we're seeing blood in a number of places, like bleeding with Chen Guà, and we'll also see blood with Li Guà, but this one also has a blood association. So of course, fish and animals that live in the water, and like routes where traffic flows, because it's about flow. Whether it's land routes or water routes. Kan is cold, you know, it represents water element, which is associated with cold in the 5-element theory, and water is yin compared to fire, which is yang. So yin and cold things, moon, black, north, snow, sinking, and hidden are all associated with yin and or coldness. The yang line, the middle line is yang. And so yang is hard and yin is soft. And so it's things with a hard pit, like a peach is soft on the outside, but it's got the hard pit on the inside. That hard pit is the yang line. Or trees that are solid wood, whereas Li Guà fire, which has a yin line in the center, will be trees that are hollow inside. The ridgepole of a building. So the way they built loops is there's going to be, you know, after they erect the structure, then there's one big pole that goes across the roof in the center. You know, it's a peaked roof, and this is the pole at the top of the peaked roof. And so that pole going across the top of the house is like this yang line in the middle. And of course, the middle sun, because the first line is the bottom line, the second line is the middle, and the third line is the end, the final part. So it's the middle sun because it's yang, so it's male. And then a bunch of miscellaneous stuff. Labor or work is associated with this since like 2,500 years. Bows bending and straightening, I guess, because water bends and is flexible. I don't know. Damage, shackles, thieves, thickets and thorns and caltrops are like, these spiky plants or spiky something. Pigs, foxes, so much stuff that like, I don't know, but these are ancient associations. Ears and earache, we'll talk about that on the medicine slide next. Wheels and chariots, I guess, for flow and movement. Anxiety, this is associated with shackles and damage and labor and thieves. So you can see some anxiety. Often in the I Ching, this trigram is associated with danger. And then more horses, which, as I said, we can try to figure out how that relates to cars. As far as medicine goes, then it represents water. It represents the moon because the moon is in the night sky and is yin, relatively speaking. Anyway, ears. I believe I have another slide where I'll explain ears in a minute. Kidneys are water element. Blood, because look in this picture, this is water. Kan is water that's flowing. It's not still water. It's water that's flowing. And so, you can kind of see the parallel in a blood vessel with blood flowing through it, a liquid flowing through it. Alcohol is a liquid that we take in the body. Coldness, because its water element is associated with cold, so contracting cold in the stomach, chronic cold diseases, cold. Watery diarrhea, because there's flow that's watery, and urinary bladder, of course, because of urination. So I think I have about the ears and so forth. Yeah, I do. Okay. Let's look at the ears for a second. Some people felt, especially in the Ming Dynasty, which is late, but you can kind of see it. If you take Shuō Guà and you turn it 90 degrees, so now it's vertical rather than horizontal lines, the eardrum is like the horizontal line, and you need the hollow space on either side for the ears to work. So that was one of the reasons why ears were associated. But of course, because it's associated with kidney, Kan is associated with kidneys, and the ears belong to the kidneys. You can also see that. Another association with Kan Guà is Mingmen or life gate, or at least the kidneys as a whole. And when you turn it on its side, then the two yin lines represent the two physical kidneys, and the one yang line represents the yang fire of Mingmen life gate. And also, I think the character for water looks a lot like the trigram. We've got the one long line in the center, and then we've got the two broken lines on either side. So, okay. So now we're at Li Guà, which is fire. It's got a yang line, a yin line, and a yang line. Since the middle line is yin, then it's the middle daughter. And so it's fire element. It's got the yin middle line, and those are the two things we find most of the correspondences from. Since it's fire, it's sun, it's lightning, as opposed to thunder, which is, lightning is hot and bright. Warmth, brightness, and light are all associated with fire. Ovens, furnaces, drying things out, dry things are associated with fire. Trees that have, too much heat and not enough water become withered. And then hollow trees, because the middle line is hollow. Did I mention that over here? No, but because of the yin middle line. dead on top is probably too much heat from fire. South is the direction of Li Guā in the post-heaven sequence of trigrams. Fire is red, but it includes all really intense colors like purple or rosy or even orange could go here as well. Rainbows are this really interesting light, rosy clouds and bright sunrise or sunset might go here because it's playing with light. Decorations, because fire is bright, fire is flashy, right? So things that have like brightness and flashiness. So decorative clothing, and pheasants are this bird that has like really intense plumage. How do the eyes work? They work because of light. Where does light come from? Leaf fire. So I'll talk about that on the next slide, the medicine slide. And then decorative clothing, so beauty and the way things manifest or the way things look. You can't see in the dark. You need light to see things. The sun, remember, is part of Li Guā too. So it's not just that you need firelight when you're indoors, but like outdoors, the sun is the big fire. And so we can see things because of it. And so it's associated with beauty and with, the way things look. This is a middle daughter because it's the middle yin line. And it represents hard things on the outside that are soft on the inside. So a helmet or an armor is hard on the outside, and then the human body is soft on the inside. That also goes for things with shells, such as tortoises, crabs, and so forth, have the hard shell on the outside, but they're soft on the inside. For whatever reason, it's associated with big bellies. Okay. Miscellaneous weapons, documents, wild animals, and alligators. You got me. I don't know. So let's talk about it in terms of medicine. So the eyes, we've got the dark pupil in the center, and dark is yin. It's got the yin line in the center. The flashy bright stuff is on the outside, so that's like yang. And as I said, the only way we can see things is when there's light, and light comes from fire, so the eyes function based on that. Okay, so in 5-element theory, the eyes are associated with the liver, but in a trigram theory, they're associated with Li Guā, fire, and the heart. And actually, the heart channel internally goes up to the eyes. The heart channel has a connection with the eyes. And if you look, for example, at acupuncture point functions, many of the points on the heart channel do treat various eye conditions. So I'm not saying liver is incorrect. I'm just saying liver isn't the only one. Since the heart, blood also, bright red. So we've seen blood in 3 places now. Kan Guā for its flowing, Chen Guā for bleeding, and the blood itself is probably Li Guā. Of course, fire flares up, so it's the upper jiao. Fire's hot, so heat disease, febrile disease. The heat of summer, including diseases caused by summer heat. Seasonal epidemics generally have high fever. And yeah, small intestine, whatever. Okay, we just have 2 more, I think. So Gan Guā is yin, yin, yang. So it's the youngest sun because the yang line is on top. On the top is the 3rd position. It represents the mountain, which is earth element. So it has something to do with earth, but we saw Kun Guā is earth, but Kun Guā is more like the flat earth or the rolling hills, but not the huge craggy mountains. This is the mountains like that. And so, it also then has some earth association, soil, stones, because it's got a yang line. It's hard earth as opposed to soft earth. Kun, the mother, is soft earth, and this, it has a yang line, so it's hard earth. So it's things like stones and things inside the earth. The nose is a mountain on your face. And it represents gates and doorways and watchtowers and gatekeepers and eunuchs. So, there are a lot of mountain passes. Like to get through the mountains, you don't go straight through and climb over the top if that's in the way. You try to go through the mountain passes. So I guess that relates to gates and doorways. And apparently eunuchs were often gatekeepers. So narrow paths and byways, like if you're on a mountain trail, those are narrow paths and byways, and they don't go straight. You know how you can have hairpin turns going up a mountain, so this is that kind of smaller path. Stopping, ending, completion, but also it represents, even though it's the end of one cycle, it's also then the next cycle is about to start. Its position in the post-heaven sequence is right at the beginning of spring, or at the end of winter. It's at the end of winter, and then spring is going to come next. So a mountain is a big obstacle and makes you stop. But it also represents the ending of one phase. Then the next phase is going to begin. Earth is yellow, associated with the color yellow in 5-element theory, because a mountain is a lump of hard stuff like stones and rocks and stuff like that. Then it represents hard, bumpy things. And so the hands, the fingers, the toes, the small bones, like the carpal bones, the metacarpal bones, the, phalanges and so forth, the metatarsals and tarsals. Yeah, those are like little rocks and stones. A strong tree with many joints. A joint in a branch, often is lumpy and hard. What do you call it? A knot in the wood. If you're sawing wood and it has a big knot, it's very hard to saw through that knot. Things growing on trees, gourds on vines. So I don't know about things growing on trees, but gourds on vines, it's on the ground, which is earth. And melons, fruits, and seeds, because those have an association with being on the earth and vines and stuff like that, maybe. It's the youngest son, so it represents youth, especially a young man. Miscellaneous things: dogs, rats, mice, tigers, foxes, birds, livestock, beasts. Just a bunch of animals. Maybe, some of them, tigers, foxes, and birds, are in the mountains, but dogs, rats, and mice are not. I don't know. And northeast is its direction in the post-heaven sequence. So medically, then remember, it represents the small bones, including the spine. And if you, take the spine on its side and you look at its, it looks like a mountain range. Oh, I should point out, in Chinese, they don't have singular and plural as obvious the way as they do in English. And so this could actually be mountains, plural. And so this looks like a mountain range when you're lying face down, just like you can see the mountain range here with the up and down. And so the hands, the fingers, the spine, I've, talked about that already. The upper back, in part because of the spine, but, Gun Gua has a relationship with meditation, where you sit with a straight back and you're quiet and still, because the mountain is still. The mountain doesn't move except earthquakes, and that's pathology. So stillness is associated with Gun Gua, and that can be included in meditation. So the upper back is, both because of the spine and because you have to sit up when you're meditating. Small bones, we've mentioned. The nose, because it's a mountain on your face. And the, Gun Gua is earth, so spleen and stomach, earth element. Besides that, swellings and tumors and lumps in your body, because it's a lump, it's a mound, it's a hard thing that shouldn't be there. And stillness, which could be stagnation. This trigram can mean obstruction, which is like stagnation. Yeah. And so here's just an image to show like also like your fist is like a mountain range. You can see the mountain range. This anything that has that kind of thing. So don't think of it as only one mountain. It can represent a mountain range, and things that have a similar image. Now, our last one is Shuō Guà. Shuō Guà is the youngest daughter. We've got the yin line on top. It's yin metal, so it's soft metal. And so it represents metal things, including blades or knives or tools, metal musical instruments. The color white is associated with metal. This can also represent the lungs. We saw Chen in certain ways, especially when it's dealing with like external invasion and weather qi, then Chen can represent the lungs. But for its more internal functions, we can maybe look at Shuō Guà for that. It's west in the post-heaven arrangement of the trigrams, and west is associated with metal element in 5-element theory. It's mid-autumn because metal is autumn. This trigram represents the marsh, and so the marsh, there's a little water is yin, right? So there's like shallow water on top. It's not like a deep, it's not deep water, it's shallow water. And so we have a marsh. A marsh is still, and so a marsh is watery, but it's still water, and still water is reflective. I'll talk about that more in a minute. So things in a marsh, hard saline soil, okay, and sheep or goats. Okay, some of these are miscellaneous. The youngest daughter, so it represents young girls in general or young women. This also has certain associations like a shaman, a female shaman. There's, some mystical associations with this, but because it's a young girl, she can be ordered around by just about anyone. So servants, concubines, female slaves, and stuff like that. There is a sex association with this. This is the youngest daughter, and so, I guess she's kind of attractive and people want to take advantage of her, and she doesn't have very much power, being, females had less power than males, and the young people had less power than males, so she has the least power of anyone in the 8 trigrams. But therefore, if she wants to get something, she has to learn to use what she has, and so she's got a reputation for being a bit sexy, and using her sex appeal to get what she wants. Because if you have no power, and if you're young and attractive, like how else are you going to get what you want? I don't blame her, but in Chinese culture, this trigram is not highly favored. It's considered like a little bit unclean or something like that. But like, who made her unclean? The people who made her be a slave. It's not her fault that she's a slave. So she pleases people to get what she wants. So gladdening, rejoicing, pleasing. She tries to make everyone happy, and then they'll favor her and give her favors and so forth. This has the broken line on top, which your mouth is the opening up on top of your body. So represents the tongue and speech. And as I said, the female shaman, because she channels and speaks for the spirits or whatever. And so somebody who talks a lot, you might associate with this trigram, but also in order to be pleasing, she might sing or recite poetry or give flattering speech as a way of trying to get what she wants when she has so little power. It also represents broken things because the broken line is on top. So something that has a crack in it. Oh, somebody I know was looking to buy something on eBay, and did a reading about if it was going to be a good thing because it was expensive, and he got Shuō Guà. So he went back and checked. I want to see photos. I want to look for cracks, and it was indeed cracked. So broken things, things with a mouth or an opening, like a bottle or something like that. Smashing and breaking, it has this broken correspondence, dropping and bursting. So the mouth, the tongue, the lips, which are both, diseases in this area, but also people can use their mouth and tongue and lips to give pleasure, whether it's singing or sex. The chest, because it's two yin things on top, the breasts and the lungs, two yin things on top, right? Your breasts are two yin things on top. The mouth is this opening on top. And the lungs, it's yin metal. Lungs are yin metal. So this also has more internal aspect of the lungs. The lungs can easily get phlegm. Saliva is in the mouth. Qi counterflow, so qi that's rushing up, gasping for breath. Improper diet, because that's a problem that happens through the mouth. Poisoning and food poisoning happens through the mouth. And why is Dui metal? Remember, metal is reflective. Look in this picture. This is still water. This is the marsh. This is still shallow water that's very reflective. It doesn't have the flowing characteristic of Guà. So its reflective nature makes it metal. So I think this is the last slide. And so that's just an overview of the 8 trigrams, and it's also kind of shows you the way we need to think in Chinese medicine by understanding how things correspond to each other. And so yeah, that's what I have to say. Okay, let me stop recording.